Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you today. I'm so grateful that you've allowed me to come into your community today to speak with you. My subtitle for my talk today is We Rise by Lifting Others. We rise by lifting others. So, what does this mean? I would contend that we invest in ourselves when we lift others up, that it's actually an investment in ourselves. How is this possible? Well, since there's only one life spiritually, and we are spiritual beings having a human experience, then our human lives are intertwined in ways that cannot be broken. So that is how we rise when we lift others up, because we're really lifting ourselves up. Therefore, what affects one of us affects all of us. So our charge in life is to help others, to be present for others. Um, So when we lend a hand to someone, we can lift our spirits and bring ourselves closer to humanity. And so many of us feel inadequate or concerned when we are given an opportunity to help others. You might say to yourself, what do I do, say, or how do I act? I'm not sure what to say. And many of us are concerned that we don't know what to say or we don't know how to help. Some of us might say, I don't want them to become dependent on me. What happens if they don't leave me alone? Uh, the others will say, I don't have time to help. I really just don't have time right now. And sometimes we can just feel a little overwhelmed at the possibility of helping others. And so Mother Teresa said, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. I think that's a beautiful quote because we will often stop ourselves from helping other people because we think it has to be great and magnificent or we have to do just the right thing. And we get lost because we think, I don't know what that right thing is. But what Mother Teresa is telling us is that we can do small things, little things with great love. And all of us are capable of doing that. So, as Reverend Jackie said, I'm a chaplain. I currently work as a chaplain. I'm retired from hospital and hospice work, but I'm actually working as a volunteer chaplain in disaster spiritual care for the American Red Cross. And so, one of the things that I've learned in helping people is that the number one thing to do is to give the gift of completely listening. Do you know that some people in their lives, no matter what age they are, and I worked with a lot of elderly people, they told me that they never experienced anyone totally listening to them. This almost made me cry because to have someone at that age say that they have never truly been listened to was a very sad experience. So I just want to leave you with this idea that by giving someone your complete attention and not thinking about what you're going to say next, but just listening and being present is probably the greatest gift you can ever give. Now, another thing I learned as a chaplain is I would go knock on people's doors in the hospital. And sometimes I would open the door and say, Hi, I'm the chaplain. Would you like a visit today? And the answer was a quick no, no, thank you. And when I was a new chaplain, that really hurt because I felt like I had not been given the opportunity to serve. But one time, someone told me, a nurse told me, remember that person that you knocked on their door and you peeked your head in and they didn't want to talk to you? And I said, Yeah. She said, I want you to know that you touched them in a deep way. The fact that you actually showed up and wanted to come talk to them meant the world to them. And so what I learned is showing up is meaningful even when the door is shut in your face. So being fully present is 98% of the job. I learned that as a chaplain. That just showing up, just being willing is 98% of the job. Whoo, we can all relax. We can all take a deep breath when we hear that because we can all be present. We can all bring our full selves to the aid of another person. There are two things that I learned to let go of. One is, I don't know what to say. Well, that's not my job. My job is to be fully present. So I learned that the hard way. And so I learned to let go of, I don't know what to say. The other thing I learned to let go of is, did I do enough? When I would leave that patient's room or that patient's home in hospice, I would often start second guessing, I don't think that went real well, or I could have done this, or I could have done that. And one of the things I learned in working in chaplaincy for 10 years was that it's not mine to know whether I did enough or not. I showed up. And so if I leave you with nothing else today, I want you to understand that it is our job when we help others just simply to be fully present. And that's enough. And all of us can do that. So let me go answer some of these questions that we have about what to do when we're asked to help. And someone might say, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And as I've said, it's being present. And then the other thing is that when you do respond, when you do engage in that conversation with the person, or when you may be helping them find their way or giving some guidance, you need to practice empathy in your responses. So we'll talk a little bit later about what empathy is versus sympathy. The next question we may have is, what do I say? What do I say? You know, this person is going through this horrible situation. I don't know what to say. So, my advice to you is to listen to your heart and respond from your heart. Come from love, come from compassion. And that's the place and the space that you need to come from. A very important lesson I learned is that silence is healing. Silence leads to more sharing. So resist that temptation to fill the space up. So when someone is sharing their heart with you, when someone is sharing their story with you, wait 5 more seconds than you feel comfortable waiting. 5 more seconds where you start to feel uncomfortable in that silence. And you'll find that they'll continue to talk. Because people need time to collect their thoughts. People need time to realize what's going on, especially if they're in a disaster situation, or if they're going through some of the worst times of their life, or they've been in a shocking experience. It can take them time to put their thoughts together. So another greatest gift you can give to people is creating that long silence in the conversation. And you lean in, show that you're attentive, that you're willing to hear, that you're fully present, and they'll start talking again. It's amazing. It's amazing. Another question you might ask is, how do I act? You know, how do I act in this situation? Act from compassion, act from non-judgment, and also accept that it is their path to choose and live. Some people would say to me, how do you do this work? How do you help other people and not take all this with you and take all of this on? And I used to say to people, it is my job to walk beside you, to not carry you. And so when we help other people, we want to make sure that we're not putting all of their problems on our back, because this is their path. These are their choices, and this is their life. And so we practice compassion with where they are, and we meet them where they are. Another question or concern that we have when we help others is, I don't want dependence. I don't want them to become too dependent on me. And so what I want you to know about that is that you want to set clear boundaries. Only do what you have comfortable doing. That's a full body yes. If you've ever heard that expression, only do what you can say yes with your whole body. That excitement, that enthusiasm to do. And so when you feel wary about doing something to help another person that may create codependence or something like that, just make sure you set a clear boundary on what you're able to do. State what you're able to do when appropriate, when that seems appropriate in the conversation. And make sure that when you provide support, that you're setting them up for success. One of the things I have to do in the American Red Cross is I have to make sure that I'm doing things that support them to find their own resources, to connect them with their spiritual communities. And so what I have to do is not lift them up literally, but provide them the way to lift themselves up. Now, another thing that we can say is, I don't have the time. And my response to you there is see all of the above. You do have time to be fully present, and you can do that in 5 minutes or less. So just like I learned when I went and knocked on the door and they said they didn't have time to talk to me, just realize in those few seconds that I said hello, that it was meaningful to them. And so, give 5 minutes. Give 5 minutes if you feel like you don't have the time. Now, I want to go back and talk about something about being fully present. What does that mean? And let's talk about a few of those points. So, being fully present is using active listening. And it's not just active listening where you lean in and you nod or you make some nonverbal communication that indicates that you're listening and you're being quiet and receiving the message coming from them. You need to provide feedback along the way. So you need to paraphrase and things like that. So if somebody says, I'm having this problem with so-and-so, you can, instead of parroting back to them, you can say, I understand that it's really tough right now. You're going through this. And that way they know that you're really listening to them. Another really difficult thing for a lot of us to do is to not be thinking about what we're going to say next while they're talking. We're kind of trained to do that. Once again, that gets back to that silence thing. We're wanting to fill that silence. And so we're like, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? That sets you up for a less than experience because you're worried about what you're going to do next. And so once again, just be fully present. Putting away everything that's on your lap, we don't want our phone, we want that put away. And we want to lean in. We literally want to lean our body in to show that we're present and that we're listening. And be aware of any nonverbal language that you have, like looking at clocks. I know one of the things I do when Reverend Jackie and I are meeting is sometimes I'll glance over at the corner of my screen at the time. And she's seen me do that before. And she's like, oh, do you need to go somewhere? And I'm like, no, I was just looking at the time. And so we want to be careful that we are engaging in being fully present with our nonverbal language as well. And sometimes we need to be aware of cultural norms, like staring at someone or looking at them. When I lived in Alaska, the native Alaskans are taught and raised in such a way that you don't look at a stranger directly in the eyes. It's considered rude. And so you want to make sure that you're doing what's culturally appropriate in the given situation as well. And finally, you want to listen and respond with empathy and not sympathy. So, Bobby, if you would, I have a little video from Brene Brown that talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And only Brene Brown could do this. And so I want her to speak.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, Not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.